Well, here goes nothing with another new episode of THC, truly independent of any outside sponsors, networks, agents, or conflicts of interest of any kind. I've got no strings on me. As always, the first hour is free and the full 2 hour show is for Plus members. And can you believe it? Right now, you can get a 7-day free trial of THC Plus, and it doesn't even require you to put in a credit card. Just grab the link from the show notes or that QR code if you're watching on YouTube. It'll take you to thehighersidechats.com, put in only your email address, and I'll send you a username and password to access the full archive of extended interviews and bonus shows going back to 2010. You can hear more about it after the show. There's other details and all that stuff. Lots of wild, taboo material to be dug up in there. Don't say I didn't warn you. Enjoy.
The Higher Side Chat Show, Greg Carlwood and Company.
Oh, it's magic, people. From the Sunshine State, I'm Greg Carlwood. And while it's interesting to debate where JFK's kill shot came from or what the hell they're doing in Antarctica, there's an argument to be made that conspiracy research can actually keep one distracted from taking the reins of their life and fulfilling their true will, much in the way that's no better than obsessive gaming, following your favorite sports team, or keeping up to date on the latest ways Disney is ruining Star Wars. But the actionable intelligence in conspiracy research has seen that the biggest swindle has been actually to extract us from the creation itself, away from a life engaged with stewardship, cultivation, and a spirituality arrived upon by direct connectedness in exchange for chasing green paper and concrete boxes on digital screens. It's actually quite impressive when you think about the ambitiousness of it all. And when you realize prohibition of alcohol and cannabis, the taking down of the Hindenburg, the hit job done on ether physics, the demonization of magic, the systematic eradication of indigenous people all over the world, UFOs, and even the ever-growing list of alternative energy researchers suffering mysterious deaths are all connected to the same end goal, keeping people scared and powerless in a well-controlled scarcity paradigm, and they'll never truly bite the hand that feeds when they've forgotten how meaningful it can be to feed themselves. Well, here to help us break the big spell is veteran organic farmer, earthworker, Reiki master, druid, and certified astrological magician, Todd Elliott. On top of 25 years of farming experience, he's been a lifelong student of mythology, religion, spirituality, folklore, and esoterica of all kinds, pulling in from the perennial Hermetic tradition, Neoplatonism, Hellenic and Northern European paganism, Kabbalah, Buddhism, esoteric Christianity, and indigenous animist traditions. He's the author of an amazing new book that's exceptionally well illustrated and well crafted, and it clocks in at almost 500 pages, titled The Cunning Farmer, Agrarian Magical Practices, Mythology, and Folklore, and it's the best thing to arrive in my mailbox for quite some time. Here he is, the sorcerer of the soil, the magi of land management, and the cunning farmer himself. Todd, welcome to the Higher Side.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me on, and thanks for that brilliant introduction. Love that. That was amazing.
I try, but man, I'm very much excited for this one. Every interview you do, I've heard several, they all start with gushing over the quality of the book, and rightfully so. It's not just full of detailed information, but it's well crafted in an age of sloppy production. I didn't even want to touch it without washing my hands first. Got to keep the kids away from it.
Me too.
But I know not everyone in this audience is really with me on the framing that the big conspiracy is to make us so ignorant of both magic and permaculture that we stay dependent on the system, like children afraid to leave home. But I am curious your thoughts on that, because it just makes work like yours way more interesting to me, just out of spite, because I do feel like they've kept us ignorant of this stuff, if not ignorant, then afraid of it. And it seems like a big deal to me. What do you think?
I completely agree with you. I think there has been, I don't want to use the word conspiracy because but I think there has been a campaign throughout history to disempower people by whatever empire has been in charge, whatever institutions have been in charge, starting from ancient times. Power structures try to maintain their power, and anything that tends to empower the lower echelons of society is frowned upon and discouraged. And you can look out throughout history and you can see these processes, whether it's growing your own food or whether it's reclaiming your sovereignty with magic. All those things have been discouraged by the elites, have always ruled over the masses.
Yeah, I find, I'm in the infancy really of trying to get my feet wet here on this acre of land in Florida, but it's just so interesting that, abundance really does, not that it's easy, it's weird to find the right language because it is hard work, but at the same time you can plant something that in a year yields so much fruit, and then you can take twigs off of that and plant them, and then a year from then you'll have even more. And it's like, this is what the creation is. This is kind of what the Garden of Eden could be. And it just took so much engineering of humanity to make us forget that because we're embedded in this world. So it's like, wow, you really got us to be completely ignorant of the ground beneath our feet, the value of sunlight, and how much abundance can be cultivated all around us. It is a really impressive feat. I kind of have to give them the old golf clap.
I mean, one of the things that people who are advocates of progress have always patted themselves on the back for is about is how small a percentage of people of the population is actually engaged in the production of food. What's something like 1% feeds 99%. That's like, oh, we've been freed from the drudgery of gardening and farming and food production. And I think more like our soil, our access to the soil, our access to nature, our access to plants has been stolen from us over the years. And we've called it progress, but what do people I mean, everywhere I run into, people say to me, I'd love to do what you do. I'd love to get back to the land. I'd love to have a garden. I'd love to just grow my own food." I think as a culture, I think we're really estranged from nature and we miss it. I think people who don't have a contact with it long to get back to nature, long to get their hands in the soil, long to grow their own food.
Yes. In fact, this was going to be something I ended the show with, but I'm just going to say it now. But it is a quote from the book that I think is great because we will talk about some of the dangers of magic a bit. But here you talk about the dangers of not engaging with the world magically. And you write, "What are the consequences of incurring the wrath of the spirits of the land? You only have to examine the lives and communities of those involved in land exploitation to see the consequences of despoiling the natural world. To paraphrase the Buddha, as surely as a cart follows an ox, addiction, crime, abusive relationships, lawsuits, divorces, accidents, chronic illness, and misfortunes of all kinds follow from a living a life out of balance with nature. The Greeks believed that hubris, pride, and disregard for the divine order of things, is followed by
Ate, yeah.
ate, the personification of folly or disillusion, which is followed by Nemesis, the goddess of vengeance who punished evildoers. This is the cycle in which divine punishment is the result of arrogance and pride in humans. And this does not just happen on a personal level. The spiritual life of my region, the nation, and the entire world is out of balance with nature. Many of our social ills can be traced back to this broken relationship between humans and the spirits of the land." Boom, that kind of says it all.
Absolutely. I stand by that. Yeah, I mean, I think once we start damaging our environment, once we start exploiting our land, once we start I think we're meant to live in harmony with creation, and as soon as we step out of bounds of that, we get the consequences, and often it's not always born was it often fortune favors the guilty is another ancient Roman quote. So, like, it's not always the people who are engaged in the destruction itself that get the immediate consequences. Oftentimes, it's the innocent. I mean, look at all these data centers here, the CEOs that are taking over large tracts of rural land all over the country and stealing the water of communities are pretty much isolated from the ill effects that their actions are having on the community and on the culture as a whole. And it's the local people that bear the cost. And it's our whole culture. It's our whole culture bears the cost.
Agreed. And so, of your own spirituality, you write, "My religious philosophy is informed by the Corpus Hermeticum, Neoplatonism, Hellenic and Northern European paganism, Kabbalah, Advaita, Vedanta."
I don't have Advaita Vedanta.
There you go. See, if you don't know it, what am I
I
supposed to
rough
do?
it out. Sanskrit's not my specialty.
Yeah, mine either. Surprise, surprise. Buddhism, esoteric Christianity, and animism through thoughts from indigenous traditions around the world. I believe in one source for all things, outside of space and time, which pours out its being as life and light, thereby creating matter and the physical cosmos. I believe, although spatial metaphors such as higher and lower are inadequate, not to be taken literally, that there exists a hierarchy of spiritual beings that descend from this one creative source that we may term gods and angels, as well as lesser spiritual beings we may call daemons. All of these are limited and finite in comparison with the one and are actually aspects of it, though through which it interacts with the cosmos, administering reality, so to speak. Man, I'm not as well versed in some of those specific schools of magic, obviously, but broadly, I totally think that is it. Why do you think so many people have a fear or a trepidation towards this model that I really think seems pretty self evident and is broadly what I think all the great mystics have said?
Why so many people have fear of that? You mean religious people or secular people or
I think both. Maybe not fear, but definitely resistance, let's say.
you could offend people on either end because religious people like to believe in a lot of people, the traditional world religions like to believe in a personal God who's sort of a divine ruler who rules over everything and gets jealous and of people who don't worship in the right way. And they're going to get offended by this broadly pantheistic and animistic and Neoplatonic cosmology. And then you're going to have secular people who are going to be offended on the other end by being spiritual at all and imputing any divinity or agency to nature and the cosmos. So yeah, you could. I managed to get the religious people and the atheists mad at the same time.
Yes. Well, when I say fear, I guess it comes from me thinking about the book in general being such more a magic book than a farming book. And I mean, it really does strike a space that I have never really found a book that hits this exact space. But it seems like there's a resistance to the worldview, but a fear of engaging with the world as if it is magical.
Yeah, I read this chapter, the part that you just read to our local county arts council in our very rural town in Kentucky, and it was largely an audience of evangelical Christians, and I was like, oh gosh, what part of this book can I read to this audience and not get run out of town on a rail or something like that. And I read the chapter with all that stuff about suffering and following, all the consequences of not living in harmony with nature. And I was like, how are these people going to receive this? Because every one of our local economy is largely based on exploiting nature, as it is everywhere. And it was surprisingly well received. I was not burned at the stake, and I managed to sell a couple copies of the book. And I was concerned about people being angry or afraid about the magical angle, and they might have been, but they didn't express that to me. I think magic is forbidden by most of the traditional monotheistic religions. I think Islam, it's forbidden in Islam. I mean, it's forbidden in Christianity. There's Christian magicians still. There's Islamic magicians still. It might be forbidden in Judaism. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it is forbidden in the Old Testament. There's things about not suffering a witch to live and all that, and there's Jewish magicians. So magic's a part of every culture and every tradition throughout the world, but also there's a effort to limit and restrict it and persecute practitioners of magic in also every culture. So that's interesting. I basically think that if we get away with it in the West, it's really not here, even in the United States, as things are going fairly conservative right now, and we have a lot of freedom compared to, say, the Middle East as far as practicing magic go. I mean, I believe in Saudi Arabia, it's a capital crime to practice magic, and that's because over there they believe in it, and here, as our culture really doesn't believe in it. People brag online about having cast a curse on this or that person. Even public officials, and nobody's like persecuting them or rounding them up. It's because it's not taken seriously, and whereas
Yeah.
cultures taken seriously, it's still fairly taboo more than it is here.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I tend to say it's perception management. They've got us to, they've had a campaign, I think, to breed materialism so aggressively that, yeah, we consider it silliness. And the people who do believe in it, even a little bit, are afraid of it. So, yeah, the first line of defense is just that it's all silliness and means nothing. But yet, if you've done any cursory study of the history of magic, it's like, wow, incredibly in depth and involved. I read your book and I'm just like, I don't know how he has time to work land and study all this complex stuff. It's like you probably haven't done much else. It's just like so all consuming. And when it comes to the religiosity of things, I think it was a Gordon White quote who said something to the effect of, saints are just the witches who got away with it.
Nah,
And I thought about that, and it's so well said because the Catholic and Christian saints, I mean, aren't these the people who have performed miracles? Isn't that a requirement to become a saint? You had to perform a miracle. Well, what is a miracle but a magical act? Sure, in the service of God, but you read a lot of these prayers, even in grimoires, and they say, I want to appeal to the Almighty ultimately, and I want the help of the Almighty. You're not trying to bend the one true God to your will often. You're usually asking. It's really just elaborate prayer.
that's what I was about to say. Yeah, magic is very close to prayer. It is. I think prayer is a kind of magic, and I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between the two. Magic is more particular and more focused, I think, and I think the magician often has more of an expect. I actually I think there's some religious people that are this way too. I think magic practitioners have more an expectation that their petitions will be granted. Although I think effective people who are effective with prayer are the same way. You got to believe in it for it to work. And if you're just throwing your will out into the wind and don't expect it to happen, it's probably not going to work.
So what was one of your first early experiences where, cuz a lot of people study this stuff and it's an intellectual pursuit, and then you're like, "Well, let me try it out. Let me see if it works." What was your first big trial that actually yielded results that made you a believer that yes, this stuff does have potency to it?
I think astrological magic has been very effective for me. I think I don't want to say, but just the fact that me, a farmer in Kentucky, just a humble guy that works the land, managed to put out a book that people are reading and get a publishing contract. I mean, I'm not trying to give magic the credit. But there's a lot of good writers out there who don't get a chance, and I feel like I got a chance, and I did a lot of magic to get this to happen. I mean, we did a lot of magic to get ahead, to not really get ahead. I mean, we're not really wealthy. I know people say, how come there aren't more rich magicians if magic works? But we do seem to have things happen when we need them to happen, and that's really all I ask for. We built a house a few years ago during the COVID epidemic when the cost of building prices went through the roof, and every step of the process of building the house, I was using magic to get us a contractor, to get us, good prices on materials. Just the fact that we have managed to do a few things that were really against the odds and succeed. I feel like magic really helped us with stuff like that.
Mm. Against the odds is basically what Gordon used to say to me, which is like magic is a probability enhancer. So, what is the probability that I'm going to find $1 million in the front yard? It's really, really low. Did it move from really, really low to just kind of low? Or, these things, it's like, what is the probability that this is going to happen? Sometimes you have outsized impacts from your magic, but that's how you know it worked because you got a better price than the guy next door. It's not like this fortune's gonna fall out of the sky into our
Right.
laps. It's just not probable either way. But yeah, these little things move the needle in the direction of the flow.
Yes, exactly. It's probability. You're not. I mean, I think a lot about weather magic, right? I have a chapter on it in the book, and that's something I try to experiment with a lot. And say I do a ritual to make it rain, and it rains like it's been a drought, but it like a weather system comes in, it rains a mile away. Did I fail, or did I get the probability closer and just get targeting a little bit off? You know what I mean?
Yes. The weather magic chapter is super interesting. You talk about I'm scrolling through my notes here. Sometimes I take so many notes it's almost useless because I've just copied a third of the book. But I remember one story where you talk about your mentor and him using a psalm to basically disintegrate a tornado.
Yeah, and his family told me that they'd seen it happen. Yeah, that impressed me. I memorized that psalm and had tried it myself on several occasions, and then I did a little more research and found like the psalm that was actually traditionally used, which wasn't Psalm 90, which is what Salvador used. It's Psalm 29, but Psalm 90 is like general for like dangers or evils or protection in general, and he used it to great effect. And I do have that one memorized because he said you're not always going to have a Bible handy or a prayer book handy. You're going to have to memorize anything really important. So
Mhm.
yeah, we've had some close. We live in basically in Tornado Alley here in northern Kentucky, and we've had some really close calls. And I always, without fail, if the bad storms are going to move through, I try to bump the danger or dissipate. Actually, it's better to try to dissipate them so they don't hurt anybody else. That's what I generally try to do. As far as I don't know what reach I have or what range I have, but as far as I can, I try to keep the community around me safe. And so far, so good.
Noble goal. And I love the old recipes in these grimoires. They're just sometimes so weird, but another one related to weather magic is from the book, a 17th century Italian grimoire recipe for rain that involves boiling artificial seawater
Yeah,
with salt and pumice, placing it in a magic circle with a bloodstone and invoking the spirits Beshard and Elo Gaffletel.
yeah.
I don't even know if I've heard of that one, but this is the weird stuff that it's like, I mean, I find it really interesting. I don't know if I'm ever going to do it, but I guess it worked if they wrote it down and it was in a book that you would be killed for possessing.
Well, I did that one, not that whole one, but I did that. I called on that spirit, LL Gafatel, last night because we really need rain badly, and it is raining very close by, and we've got a 90% chance of rain. So I really hope that those spirits can bring us some rain here to the farm actually today, and not flood out my neighbors to the south because well, we're all of Kentucky's in a drought basically, so we all could use some rain. But I hope we get some right here.
I hope so too. I think people listening will throw their intention at it, and when it airs, maybe you'll get a little bit more. So, when I do these kinds of shows that involve permaculture, I get a lot of comments that are like, well, it must be nice to be a well to do podcaster who has land and wants to LARP as a farmer, talking about how easy it is. We should all just do it. But, people forget I've been doing this for 15 years, but the economic situation is rough out there. Like, I'm not going to say it isn't. But when I hear that stuff, it really just seems like their own resistance. There's a thousand reasons to not do something and tell yourself you can't and limit yourself. And, if you have a goal, it might take years to get there. I've wanted an acre of land for 8 years and I slowly built my life to where I could have it. Like, I'm not going to apologize for that or feel guilty about it, but I understand that people think I'm talking at a level that they're just like, well, I'm not there yet. And I just thought this would be fun because I think people want to get land. That's probably a goal for many people, but it's just tough to do. So in the book, you do mention wealth magic or other magical aims. And I thought we would give people something that might help them make some progress because we are all at different stages of life. But you're right. Here's a brief example of how to use moon phases with planetary powers. Let's say I want to perform some wealth magic, which falls under the influence of Jupiter. I would then use Agrippa's square and sigil of Jupiter and its spirits, but I would perform the operation on Jupiter's day, Thursday, and if I could manage it, during the hour of Jupiter as well. I would also want Jupiter in good condition astrologically, which means that he is in one of the signs he rules.
Like right now,
Yeah, I was going to say either Sagittarius or Pisces, or where he's exalted like Cancer, which is right now, and also not afflicted by being in retrograde too close to the sun or in a hard aspect with Mars or Saturn. Waiting for Jupiter to be in good astrological condition is not always possible because he moves rather slowly, spending about a year in each sign on average. Sometimes important magic can't wait, and a waxing moon on a Thursday at sunrise is the best you can do. The more factors you add, the harder it is to find an auspicious time to do your magic, but you gain the cooperation of the celestial forces of the cosmos by doing so. Well, I love how specific you get with this kind of stuff because a lot of magic books will be quite vague. But talk to us about the mechanics here. I hear this sort of stuff, and time again, I'm just like, I like the idea of it, but it's so bizarre that this can work.
this is the whole like Sabian, Hermetic, Renaissance, Neoplatonist like worldview that when you line up, everything in the material world emanates from the spiritual world, and when you get everything lined up from Jupiter being in exaltation or rulership, the waxing moon making a trine to Jupiter like it was. I don't think it is right now, but it was in Pisces yesterday. So anyway, that's a waning moon. But anyway, when you get everything lined up, the spiritual influences flow more directly. it's like the chain is lined up straight, and the energy can flow just down through emanate exactly where you want it to go, and you can put yourself in this current of energy and direct it to achieving goals in your life, like buying an acre of land. I mean, that's a really specific magical goal. I mean, I know from experience you can do that because we have used magic to get a little bit of land and had everything line up just perfectly for us to get some. And I highly recommend it. And planetary magic is one opportunity. Angel magic is another. I would still add the moon phases and the planets, even if I was doing something like, the 72 angels of magic or something like that, which is another good one for beginners to use.
So there you go, people. Instead of complaining in my comments section, get right with Jupiter, do the thing, and achieve your goals. But I guess I want to ask you a little more about the philosophy behind this because magic can scale to get quite dark. We all know that. It can get morally precarious. But here we're just talking about timing cycles and essentially prayer. You also write about Agrippa's process for engraving a talisman on silver under a waxing moon in Taurus to bring the wearer good fortune and good health. At this level, I don't know how anyone could say this is evil or somehow bad. Like we said earlier, if everything is the creator and we are fractals of the creator and we come into the physical game with amnesia to make it actually work, then the creator built in these codes for the game of life to be fun. And I would even say, as mechanisms available to us in case the demons really do capture the material world, which they kind of have. Empire is absolutely run amok. And it's almost like, in case of emergency, break glass, kind of a cosmic hack available to any common person. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I got a couple thoughts, and the one I want to get out first is one of the things in the Middle Ages that the ascendant Christian movement did, and I don't want to badmouth Christians because I come from a Christian background, but I have been studying imperialism and colonialism in the expansion of the early Christian movement in, say, Northern Europe and Western Europe recently in the what we call the Dark Ages or the early Middle Ages. And one of the first things that they tried to do once they got power, and I don't think Christianity was originally like this, but it became like this once it allied with the forces of empire during the reign of the Emperor Constantine. But one of the first things they tried to do is to establish a list of approved and unapproved entities. And this is in the writings of Saint Augustine, who wrote way back in the 3rd century. So basically, you've got the Trinity, the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. You've got a couple angels that are okay. Then you've got and everything else is a demon. Everything else is, you're not allowed to work with anything else. So you had a cabal of people deciding which spiritual forces were kosher and which were not, basically. And you're only allowed to work with saints, with the Trinity, and with like the big four angels.
Michelangelo, Leonardo,
Yeah,
Donatello, and
right. Raphael, Oriel, and Gabriel. Those big four
yes.
angels, right? And anything else is a demon, probably, or suspected of being a demon. So, well, lunar mansions are all out. Planets are all out. I mean, any planetary magic is all out because the spirits of the planets are probably demons. They might be angels, but we're not sure. Better to be played safe than sorry. I mean, that was the position of the church in the Middle Ages. Anything else is necromancy, which in the Middle Age, it used to mean divination with spirits of the dead, but it came to mean any forbidden magic, like the Summa Sacra Magicae that you have on your bookshelf there was pretty much considered necromancy. That's why they put all the things about it being sacred magic, but it was pretty well forbidden. I think the author Berengar Ganelli got away with not being burned at the stake, but some of the medieval magicians working in the same material didn't. So that's one thing. There was a movement by the authorities to limit the amount, basically to put limits on the spiritual cosmos and not allow people to work with most of the entities, like nature spirits, right out. Fairies, no way. Spirits of the dead, no, we can't do any of that. It's all forbidden. And then the other thing that I thought of, there's several books of magic, several grimoires called the Book of Raziel or the Sefer Raziel, and the legend behind the Sefer Raziel, which is a Jewish book of magic, and it came into medieval Christian Europe and was Christianized as the Sefer Razielis. Anyway, the legend behind that was that when Adam was expelled from paradise, the archangel Raziel gave this book to Adam, excuse me, of magic to help him cope with the post-lapsarian world, with the fallen world. So this angel was sent by God to give Adam the cheat codes,
Mm.
basically. And I really love that. I really love that legend because here we are, the children of Adam, the legendary children of Adam, and that's what magic is for us. It's the cheat codes to the universe where we can pull these secret strings of causation and perhaps make life a little easier for us.
Yeah, I like that too. And sometimes I think people really just need to ask themselves if they truly trust empire or not. They might say they don't, but then in a situation like COVID, you see a lot of people who used to think it was fun to LARP as an alternative conspiracy person, go with the flow of all the rules and everything. That's their right to do. But you have to ask yourself, does the authority of any age care about my well being? Are they just trying to protect me or is something else afoot? So you go back to a time when they're putting a huge amount of energy into banning a lot of different aspects of spirituality and spiritual beings. Why do they do that? Is it because they're caring and considerate of like they're afraid that you might hurt yourself? Or are they afraid you might discover real power? It's just, it comes down to something that simple. And it's like if it was just a superstition, they wouldn't care that much. They care because they know that there is power in it.
Having recently studied the Middle Ages, Middle Ages and the process of conversion in, say, the Frankish Empire, the phrase "one God, one king, one bishop," having one narrative helps to unify the empire. If you have a whole bunch of people doing their own thing spiritually, that's not really easy to unify an empire. If you have people sneaking out to springs and sacred trees and leaving offerings to unapproved spirits, but you can't manage that. You can't control that. But if you can go get them all in church on Sunday, hearing the sermon about how they ought to obey the king and pay their tithe, those people are a lot easier to control. If you have your
Hmm.
own sovereign indigenous spiritual tradition, you can't be controlled that easily. But if you're following the imperial religion, you're much easier to control.
Good points. And the book is not only full of historical, grimoiric information and recipes, but also your own stories, which I just think are really interesting because the materialist conditioning is so strong sometimes we don't know how to think about events in other terms. But talk to us about this time that the fairies took your cow.
Yeah, that was weird. Well, I'm not sure that fairies took the cow, but what I say is that that's definitely what the old people in Ireland would have said, or
Hmm.
in the old country would have definitely said that my the fairies took my cow. I had a beautiful Jersey cow, very like lovely. She was a show animal. She'd been in the like somebody's 4-H show calf, and we bought her as a milk cow. And I don't know, I kind of have a soft spot for Jersey cows. They're really cute. They have those big eyes and those long eyelashes, and they're really good mothers, and they make a lot of milk, and that's how we provided milk for our family. So one day, I always kept a calf with her so I wouldn't have to milk every day, and she had a 3-month-old calf, and he was pretty big. And, I don't know if you know anything about cows, but they never leave their calves. They never leave. They're the best mothers in the world. That's why they're the symbol of the mother goddess in India, all of in other places, in Egypt, they're like the symbol of the mother goddess. They're like the best mothers in the animal kingdom. That I was just talking with my wife today about how a cow will never on her own give up a calf. Well, so one day, my wife and I, it was a Sunday evening, and my wife and I had to go to a social engagement, and this cow started acting crazy. She started running around up and down the fence, acting like she was in heat. But I had a bull in the pasture, so I didn't think she was actually in heat. She would have been bred back with the bull was doing his job. But she was acting crazy, and she was looking out far away, like, at these cows that were on the other side of the hill, like my neighbor's cows, and I had to leave, so I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't think she'd get out. When I got home, she had broken out of the fence. This is an extremely tame animal, really tame. I mean, never acted crazy like this, and she broke out of the fence and just ran away into 100 acres of woods that are behind her house and never came home and left her calf and her herd. and never came back. And I thought to myself at the time, this is exactly what the old timers would have said, that the fairies took my cow. But she went off in the woods, and the calf bawled and bawled and bawled, and I went into the woods and looked for it. It was high summer, and the woods here like the freaking rainforest in the summer. You gotta have a machete with you to get through. There's thorns and stinging insects. I drove around on the farms nearby and never found her again. I never found even a trace, and
Hmm.
that's pretty weird.
Yeah. I like thinking about events in a more metaphysical context, or that there could be metaphysical factors involved that we tend to not consider. And when you look at odd behavior like that, something motivated this cow to do this behavior, and it's something that apparently we can't see. So I just thought that was a fun story to recontextualize events that fall outside of the norm.
Yeah, I asked Ed about it, and he said she probably had a brain infection, and I needed to be feeding all my cattle antibiotics all the time.
Yeah, not vaccinated enough, I'm sure.
Well, none of my cattle are vaccinated. They're too wild. I can't catch them. I could have vaccinated that one if I wanted to. 'Cause she's pretty tame, but the wild ones, they're not wild, but they're not going to let me walk up to them with a syringe.
Well, good. It just seems like in our system that that's always the solution: is more shots, more medication.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly what. And the vet was like shaking his head, like you just don't treat your cow. You need to be giving them this antibiotic every day so they don't get this brain worm. Incredibly weird. Yeah, I was like, no, I don't think so.
I'm with you.
I mean, I think the fairies or the metaphysical level of things is definitely real, and I think that some aspect of being out of harmony with our environment, like I said, can actually make us sick, and that the ancient people specifically would ascribe that causation to spiritual entities. You know, that demons or fairies or whatever could cause illness in a person. I think that that's actually a thing. It's like it's called not being respectful to your environment, not being in tune with your environment can make you sick in some way, can predispose you for being ill. And I don't know what the cow did to deserve it, but
So I can't believe we really haven't even gotten that deep into the book, but your first chapter is really where I find myself in trying to consult the genius loci, the spirit of the place. And this is something you don't have to own land to do. I remember when I was just renting, I would see this giant tree that stood over all the other trees in the neighborhood, and I'd be talking to Gordon, like, how do I talk to this tree, for example? Seems so silly, but I was just like, I want to take the ideas that you're giving me and put it into practice somehow. It never did work out. But you can look around your general environment, whether you own or rent, and find a power place, I guess. But talk to us about just this idea of how to get into the mindset of consulting the genius loci and finding a power place in your environment.
one of the things as I was doing this research that I keep mentioning, and folks can read about it on my Substack if they're interested, because I did a pretty good post on that recently. One of the things that the ancient authorities prohibited in the early Middle Ages, that the ecclesiastical authorities prohibited their flocks from doing, was leaving offerings at trees and springs. So that was something that was almost universally forbidden by the church authorities, was going out to these trees, these sacred trees, and performing rituals or just leaving offerings or praying for healing or praying for abundance or praying for good crops. This is something people did. And it's something that I do. And I think it's something that's accessible to anyone. So you could have gone up to that tree in your neighborhood and left a discreet offering of like a lot of indigenous people will save a plate of food whenever they're eating and bring it out of the house and leave it outside of the house for the spirits. Just take that down to that big tree and leave a plate of food, or leave an offering of some kind, some cornmeal, some tobacco, some milk, some cream, a beer or something like that. Pour out a beer at the tree and just say some prayers that, like, I honor you, I recognize you, I want to enter into a relationship with you. Give me some guidance. I mean, it's just as simple as that. Kind of feel dumb when you do it. Maybe at first you feel silly, but it's about causing a change in you, because the nature spirits aren't separate from you. They're part of you, and you have to open that part of you that can open up to them. And you do that by engaging in these ritual actions that might seem silly at first, but it's no sillier than any other religious behavior if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, if they put the energy into banning it, then I kind of want to do it. So as long as it's not, hurting anybody.
I've been researching these medieval penitential manuals from the 8th, ninth, 10th centuries that they put out in Northern Europe that were basically the penance that the priests would give to their flocks for whenever they, let's see, you left offerings at a tree or you, I don't know, engaged in divination or something like that. They'd be like, well, that's, so many, you got to recite these penitential psalms and fast on bread and water. And I thought about making a t-shirt that says everything I want to do was prohibited in medieval penitential manuals. It's a little cumbersome, but I mean,
I
seriously,
like
like
it.
everything that I do here in my spiritual practice was totally illegal that back then. The only thing you're allowed to do, if you went anywhere but a church to do your religious practices, that was verboten, you know?
Heck yeah. So if we stick with trees, you do write about finding the power center of a piece of land like a big oak tree, which I happen to have. And I did gravitate to it. Like I hung the kids' swing under this particular tree and thought it looked like the best place in the yard, though I do feel like it might fall on the house in a decade if it's not dealt with. So maybe I should start talking to this tree now and say, hey, lean the other way, buddy. But
Yeah. Is this your place in Florida?
yes,
Yeah. Is it a big live oak?
it is.
I love those things. They're
Me
gorgeous.
too. It looks like the DVD cover of Sleepy Hollow. But
Yep. Spanish moth from it and stuff.
yeah, yeah, which is a natural air purifier. So I always just think about these things like the fact that there's a highway, I mean, maybe a mile away, but I have all these trees that have all this Spanish moss, and it's considered a really effective air purifier. And it's like
Oh yeah.
nature again is right there, ready to beat back the negative toxicity of industrialization. And it's just a really well designed system. So with this tree, I know we can connect with it by doing the offerings and stuff, but I'm curious. You talk about a tree like this being a guardian tree spirit. Well, I'm curious what a guardian tree spirit can actually do. What sort of agency would it have?
Well, no, I don't know exactly what it can do. I feel like they keep a piece of land safe. Obviously, they have limits to what they can do because people freaking clear cut forests and stuff like that. And Caesar beat the Druids, and there's limits, right?
Yeah,
The Empire has its magic too, but as far as the trees, I feel like they are a thin place. You know what I mean by
liminal
that?
place.
Yeah, a liminal place, like a place where the worlds connect. And I also feel like they're also an antenna. So to the spirit world or to the celestial world and to the underworld, I write a little bit about that, about the symbolism of the tree. They're like a ready-made temple and image of the shamanic cosmos. So I feel like you can go down there and your prayers will be heard and answered in a way that they aren't heard in other places, if that makes any sense, just because of the tree's ability to be a broadcaster. And I don't have any proof for that, but that's the way it feels to me. That's my intuition when I go down to
Yeah,
my trees and pray. It's better for me. It's my church, it's my temple.
it makes sense to me. I mean, how many pieces of pop culture have we seen where if it has any kind of mysticism at all, it's almost always a giant sacred tree. And
Yeah.
it is for that purpose, whether it's Avatar or Game of Thrones or Lord of the
Oh,
Rings. Like,
Avatar. Yeah, and what did the Empire try to do? Right away, what did they try to do? They tried to destroy that tree in Avatar. It was like, "Well, there's a giant deposit of our lovely mineral under there that we need.
yeah,
We'll just have to wreck their say they'll listen to us once we destroy their tree." I mean, that's the playbook taken out of first of all, taken out of the Old Testament in the Bible. That's sort of what the authorities tried to do in the Old Testament. They destroyed all the sacred trees of the Canaanite pagans. And then in medieval Europe, Saint Martin of Tours destroyed the sacred tree of the pagans in Gaul. And then Charlemagne sent missionaries like Saint Boniface to destroy the sacred trees of the Germans. And all of these authorities that were cutting down these sacred trees were quoting that original scripture. I believe it might be First or Second Samuel, where they're destroying these sacred trees in the Old Testament. It might be Judges. It's somewhere in those historic books of the Old Testament. But yeah, yeah, it's a playbook.
it
But
is.
to be honest, in desert places, and I live in a pretty well forested environment. our farmland is clearings in the forest. But I mean, in other places, I believe a rock, I'm sure would be just as good, or any other a rock formation or a mountaintop. That was another thing. Other traditional sites associated with pagan worship, or people built stone circles out on the moor. You got to make your own if there's not one there.
Hmm. And you describe in the book a visionary experience, at least one, of connecting with a tree spirit. Tell people what that was like.
You mean the one where I talk about feeling the energy flowing through the land and stuff like that?
I mean the one where you accidentally got a toxic sap in your eye.
Oh, yeah, 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 that was that one, yeah. I always like to stay up late, and if particularly if it's a beautiful night and the moon is out, and go for a walk. And there's a farm across the road where I like to go and leave offerings, and it's got a bunch of abandoned outbuildings, and it can be kind of spooky there, and I like it because of that. I mean, there's, like, loose roofing tin rattling in the wind, and, you know, trees are creaking on the old buildings and stuff like that. And I went out there one night, and on my way out, I brought a little tobacco, and I brought a little bit of beer. I was walked past a patch of Jimson weed, and I remembered that the Native Americans here probably use Jimson weed as an entheogen, and I don't recommend that to the crowd here. It's pretty dangerous, but in fact, it's so potent that it can even get you a little bit of a dose from handling it, as my story will illustrate. I walked out to this place. I held this Jimson weed flowers in my hand. I picked about 3, and I was gonna leave them with the beer and the tobacco as an offering. And it occurred to me my hand was really sweaty, and the alkaloids might be absorbed from my hand, so I put them in my pocket. And later on, I went out there, I left my offerings, I took them out of my pocket, I put down my tobacco, I poured up my beer, I said a little prayer, to the nature spirits and to the gods that they would accept this offering, and the spirits of the land. And I walked out onto this field in the moonlight, and I leaned on my stick here. I got this stick that I made, and I lean on it here. It's got a little fork at the top, and I leaned on it to support myself, and just kind of went into a reverie and a vision where I imagined myself traveling back in time and talking to the people that used to live in the land, the couple that used to run the farm at first, and then the people before them, all the settlers, and then before them, the indigenous people that lived there at the time of European contact, and then even back to the people that lived here 2,000 years ago, the famous Adena culture that built the mounds, the Adena and the Hopewell culture that built all the mounds in Ohio and Kentucky that are pretty well known. And I sort of went into communion with them, and I could see them, and I could see how they lived, and I could see how they passed away. I tell the full story in the book, and I went back to the mammoths and the mastodons, and then I kind of came to myself, and I looked at my watch, and almost an hour had passed that I was in this rever. I could Another thing that happened was I could see the energy lines going through the land and going up the trees, through the roots up to the trees, and making contact with the sky. And an hour passed by with this vision, and I went home. I looked in the mirror. No, I went home and I went to bed. And I got up in the morning. I looked in the mirror, and everything kind of looked weird. Still, like the light wasn't quite right. It was a little too. I looked in the mirror, and my right eye was dilated, my right pupil, and I kind of panicked a little bit, like, oh God, something's happened to me. I've had a stroke or something like that. And I remembered that I held that Jimson weed in my hands, and I must have rubbed my eye and gotten the
Yeah.
sap in my eye. And I don't think I had a full. I know that I didn't have a full blown experience with that, but I wonder how much it contributed to my reverie that night.
Yeah. I think that's why psychedelic compounds are all throughout nature. Is it's kind of like, yeah, it might be dangerous, but it also gives people a little boost when they need one to see that stuff. Because sometimes you only need one experience to break through the material paradigm, and then you're fixed, you know?
Yeah.
So sometimes a little danger is required. But
I can go back to that place on a similar night, and I can usually, now that I've done that once, I can usually touch that place. Yeah, I can get to that place and connect to
yeah,
that again, usually.
yeah. I'm also curious to get your thoughts on the mechanics between spirits and certain plants. Like you do have a section where you talk about the doctrine of signatures, which I've always really liked. The idea that things like walnuts look like brains, and thus you eat walnuts and they're good for your brain. Or The strawberry looks like a heart. Come to find out it's good for heart health. These things are so interesting to me. But along with that, it's like, how do spirits relate to various plants? Do you see it as like an overseer spirit that is present, like one spirit present in all of, like all muscadine grapevines have this one overseer spirit? Or do you see them like people of individualized personalities to some degree?
I think they're both, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
each individual plant has a spiritual.
We are both too, right? I mean, it's kind of like human beings are both.
Yeah, human beings are both. I mean, we have, like, the anthropos or whatever, the spiritual man or whatever, human that connects us all as human beings, like the species mind, and then we have our own individual souls. So, yeah, I think that's the same thing with plants. I think that each one of them is an individual, but I think that the species as a whole, and I think the land interacts with the plant too. There's some plants that are highly influenced by the land, like the land really wants to grow them, and it grows them well. I think I quote Albertus Magnus in there and says, "The place and the time and the disposition of the heavens all contributes to the potency, the spiritual potency of the herb at the time." There's a lot of there's a lot of teachings that say if you're using herbs for magic that you want to gather at those planetary times because that's when their planetary efficiency is enhanced. Like, oh, for instance, I have this little henbane plant here in this little pot, and if you wanted to use that for magic, you would gather that at Saturn hour on Saturn day, like Saturday morning at sunrise or something like that, and its Saturnian virtue would be more effective if harvested at that time.
Mm. I recall taking some of Gordon's magical classes, and that would be the most difficult part. Like, I would finally reach the point where it's like, okay, I'm motivated. I don't have anything to do tomorrow. I'm going to try to do this ritual. And it's like the timing is not right at all. And it's like just getting the timing right is so difficult for a modern person in the way we live that it just never really got past the intellectual stage. And that's the other thing is like, so you talk about in my situation, I might go to this particular oak tree and I might try to make a altar, find a big flat rock and make an altar and start putting offerings there. And that's great. But working the land is already hard. Florida's hot if you haven't heard. I don't want to say, is the juice worth the squeeze or, what am I going to get out of this? Because that's kind of the exploitative mindset. But it just seems like another thing that's almost never ending, like getting a Tamagotchi or getting another pet. Like we have chickens, they're a lot of work. And now I'm gonna go out and feed the chickens, give the chickens water, make sure the cats and the kids are fed and have water, and then I got to go give some milk to the tree. It's like, okay, some things are just nice to do. I will do it, I guess, but I guess I'm trying to find out what's in it for me.
Well, I mean, if you're called to this kind of thing, which not everybody is, you're going to desire. Like for myself, I feel like a really huge desire to connect with spiritual realities. It's like it's definitely a desire, it's definitely like a hunger almost. So like I go down to the tree in like seeking connection, and that's what I get out of it is connection. It's like like I want that. So I do the things that can help me get that connection. And I realize that not everybody wants that, and I guess my book is addressed to the people that do, and it sounds like you do too. So, you have to make some space in it, otherwise you wouldn't have taken the courses and done the stuff. But you gotta make some space for it in your life in order for it to work, and planetary timing is a good way of making space. Like since I've gotten serious into this like oak tree thing that I've got, I try to go there on Thursday night because that's Thor's day, right? That's like Thor is the god of the oak. Jupiter's the god. That's Jupiter day. The Jupiter's the god of the oak. If there's only one day I'm going to go to or one night I'm going to go down to the oak tree, it's going to be Thursday,
Mm.
because that's the day. And then on Wednesday, I always do my Mercury practice. I don't always do it the hour's harder to get than the day. I always do my Mercury practice on Wednesday. I do my Mars practice on Tuesday, moon practice on Monday, Venus practice on Friday, Saturn practice on Saturday, Sun practice on Sunday. So like I don't always get the hour, but I get the day.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So that's easier to get the day.
Yeah, and I could understand that if I were to start doing this, maybe just in general, the ease and the flow of like trying to cultivate this food forest on this land, it might go a little smoother. It's hard to quantify. It's not like we could say, oh, X amount of plates of food under the tree equals X amount of increased yield. It's not really like that. But, maybe we could say things would go smoother. It just kind of upsets me that you see some people have so much success and pay zero attention whatsoever to the spirit world. I mean, maybe it's material success, matrix designed success, but still, it's like, well, if this stuff is important, if this stuff matters, I know I read that quote at the beginning, which is a good way to wrap your head around it, but if this matters, why does my neighbor who cleared out all the land and really just grows grass and has some Mexican guy mow it every weekend? It looks like he's doing quite well, but yet he's so disrespectful to the land and never gives any mind to spiritual things at all. But the fairies aren't taking his dogs.
It's the old thing. Why do good things happen to bad people, and why do bad things happen to good people? It's that old thing. I mean, why does karma look like that sometimes? I mean, in the theory of karma, that's because everything is played out over multiple lives, but and I don't want to get into that metaphysics right now, but I'm an astrologer. You gotta look at people's birth charts too. I mean, I have
Yeah.
Saturn in the 2nd house. I'm probably never gonna be a multimillionaire. Saturn 2nd house is your personal finances, and Saturn tends to keep things, all other things being equal, kinda poor, and I'm gonna what money I have is gonna come to me through Saturnian means like farming. So, Saturn rules my career, my 10th house, and is in my 2nd house. So my Saturn is gonna be a big part of my life always. So if you have Saturn in your 2nd house, maybe you're not going to be super wealthy, or maybe wealth is going to come to you late in life. So I mean, I think fate, personal fate, is definitely a thing, and you really can't. I really think you're called to certain things, and the fates give you certain talents and certain potentials and certain opportunities in your life. I mean, why are some people born to wealth and ease and other people born to struggle? I mean,
Uh,
there's no other answer. I mean, that is one of the reasons I kind of don't believe in a personal God directing all this, because he would have to be a total asshole to make some people just have all the disadvantages that they're born into, and other people have all the advantages. I mean, I believe in fate. I believe in the fates, and these things are ordained for people by forces beyond their control. And there's some things you can change and some things you aren't. And as the old saying goes, you need the wisdom to know the difference.
right, right. I know we're getting to the end of the road here. This is one thing I wanted to throw in, I wanted to ask you about. So, the theurgy chapter, huge, dense chapter, one of the most interesting and compelling in the book. But just to quote it, you write, in Western Neoplatonic magic, as practiced by the cunning farmer, even when our aims are mundane, we often bring energy from the top of the hierarchy down, calling upon the divine by the names appropriate to our goal, and then the archangel of the appropriate sphere, then the angel, and finally the elemental spirit given charge over the aspect of nature we wish to influence. We do this whether the goal of the operation is to call the rain, petition for profit in business, or seek some other earthly goal. The super celestial realm, the realm of the transcendent divine, is thus the starting point for operations of what we may call high magic, as distinguished from operations involving only elemental beings, nature spirits, and chthonic entities, which is traditionally called low magic. Well, I was just curious if you had anything to say about the potency or risk factor or effectiveness of the differential between high magic and low magic.
I really don't worry too much about the risk factor, but I feel like unless you come from an initiatory tradition of like folk magic or something like that, there's an element of making it up there. And I often, when I do low magic, am pretty much winging it. It might be some spirit led winging, like whatever gives me whatever inspirate. Like I feel like I'm inspired to do some low magic, like I don't know, work with runes down at my oak tree or whatever. I feel like I might be like winging it basically, but I'm working within a system that was articulated by Henry Cornelius Agrippa and expanded on by the Golden Dawn or something like that when I'm doing high magic. It's based on Renaissance Hermetic Kabbalah. It's based on a grip, the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley. I mean, there's a full tradition there, and there's a methodology which you can read about in many different sources. So yeah, that thing where I'm talking about calling by the divine name appropriate to the sphere that you're working on. I just did that last night for some rain magic, and yeah, it's effective. It's raining all around us right now, very close by.
Love it.
I think it'll rain later on today. It's humid as hell. But yeah, that's a methodology that's accessible. Accessible. Angel magic and elemental magic is pretty accessible, and it can be found in a number of texts and books. But I don't think it's dangerous. I mean, there's always the like unintended law of unintended consequences, I suppose. I've heard magic practitioners say that angels can be hard to access, require a lot of preparation. I guess that's true if you're a lot of magicians talk about manifesting to visible appearance, and I don't really do that. I'm just trying to get results. So I do use a pendulum to see if the spirit has arrived or heard my petition. And usually like the pendulum goes wild when I've done that. And I know I've been heard at that point, but I don't usually see anything. Sometimes I've had a tree fall in the woods at a dramatic part of the ritual, or like the door slam or something like that, or like a gust of wind, a sudden gust of wind or something, some sign. But yeah, a lot of times it's just I know that I've gotten my result. You know, I end up that I've been heard. And I don't want to plug for anybody, but there's a book called The 72 Angels of Magic by Damon Brand, which is really approachable angel magic. A lot of magicians sort of poo-poo these guys because they're too approachable. But I think if you combine that approach from guys like Damon Brand with the Golden Dawn method, I think you get a really powerful system. Basically, it's angel flavored chaos magic. And
There you go.
I think chaos magic can be pretty effective. I'm not into the pop culture things, but I prefer something a little classier. So like Gordon was into chaos magic. I mean, it freed us up to be creative with our magic, and that's why I don't feel like I like a little structure. I like a little tradition. I'm sort of I like Hebrew and Greek and Latin. I like the grimoires, so I'll take some practices from them, and I'll make my own like sort of creature out of all that. I like low magic. I like natural magic, elemental magic, druid magic, heathen magic. I do all that different times, but I think they're all appropriate. I try to lay out like a fourfold cosmology where there's like the theurgic, super celestial magic, angel magic, divine names, sort of that like Hebrew, Greek theurgic magic dealing with angels and gods. And then there's the celestial magic dealing with planetary spirits, astrological magic, fixed star talismans, and things like that. Then there are lunar mansions, and then there's like earth magic, like elementals. And then there's working with chthonic spirits and spirits of the dead and underworld entities. So there's these four different realms of magic that I think are useful for different things, different goals.
I love it. Man, it is really dense stuff. I do think people should engage with it. The universe is magical. That's not going to change. It's just how aware of it are you and how involved are you, I guess, on a personal level. But the book is amazing. Obviously, I got it right here. Super thick boy, and it's a work of art and an academic work. It's great. Yes. So thank you so much for taking the time. A true pleasure to talk to you. Let the people know what they should know about getting the book. I mean, that's easy, but links, further reading, and remind them how to join the CSA if you're in Ohio or in the Substack, all the good stuff.
Okay. The book can be purchased from Inner Traditions directly, from Amazon, from Barnes and Noble. I always encourage people to go to their local bookstore and get them to order a copy. So it puts me on the map if you can do that. You can order a copy directly from me, a signed copy. I can ship one out to you. You can pay me through PayPal. You can email me about that. You can contact me through Substack. My website, I keep saying this on every podcast I'm on, but it's about to go online, is thecunningfarmer.com. You can reach out to me for a copy of the book through there. It's not online yet, but it should be online in the next week or so. you can contact me through Substack. That's thecunningfarmer.substack.com, and you can message me through there. You can find me on Facebook, The Cunning Farmer on Facebook, on Instagram. I'm working on another book, hopefully, which will be published in sometime in the next couple of years. I don't have a deal yet, but I have a we're interested from the publisher, so which will be called tentative working title is On the Rustic Deities, On the Rustic Gods. That's the working title. It'll be about forming a specific relationship with nature deities, and it'll be a little more practical than the Cunning Farmer. It'll have some practical tips to working with particular deities, as well as some like historical background, things like that, and lore, mythology, all the stuff that I love. Check out my blog, subscribe to my blog, follow me on Instagram and Facebook and all those things. And yeah, I look forward to and my CSA. You can reach out to us if you want to join the CSA if you live in Cincinnati or Northern Kentucky, and that's hazelfieldfarm.com.
Okay, awesome. Man, well, I look forward to another book because this one is so good, but super insightful. Great talking to you. Thanks for being so candid and open about such strange stuff. Impressive range of knowledge. Much appreciated, and take care.
Well, thank you, Greg. It's been really great being on your show. It was really fun. Fun talking to you.
All right. How about that? Bringing it in for the fourth show of the month, dipping our toes back in the esoteric magical waters, and it's actually a rare case of responding to a publisher with a pitch. I've said before, it's becoming increasingly rare for me to take those, mainly because I get so many low quality pitches for books that have no place on THC. I got pitched a fantasy cookbook not long ago. Sauron scrambled eggs, Lord Hightower's pancake tall stack. I did actually consider doing that one and playing it completely straight, but really, I just couldn't reward that behavior. If you don't know the show and what's good for it, leave me alone. But I do have some contacts that I know send good quality recommendations, and as soon as I saw the name of this book, I was intrigued. And when I looked through the ebook, I was pretty sold on the material. And then they sent me the physical book, and I put it in a very rare class of books that just have such a high level of production that it's impressive. You don't see it much anymore, especially in the alternative world. So often I'm getting Amazon, self-published, poorly formatted, full of typos, one-man production type of stuff, which is fine. We do what we got to do, but this one was something special. And there are actually several shows on my calendar that are coming up that I knew Gordon would have appreciated, or guests that I've commented on before wouldn't do my show. Suddenly they are going to do it. And it's just one of those things, talking with a colleague. We pretty much always had something to go back and forth on almost every week, but it would never really be anything about an upcoming show until it was out there. And then he would often see it and right away have something funny to say about it. And I fully had him in mind when I was preparing for this show. I knew he would have had a lot to say about the interview, and it's just bittersweet that this was squarely in his wheelhouse. On top of his appreciation for well-crafted books, it really hit the trifecta of Gordon's expertise and interest, and it was just 30 days shy. Who would have thought? I have found the hardest thing about losing people is getting hit with like the next 20 things that they would have liked. Things have been so crazy since my dad died. The Butler shooting, UFC at the White House, and the executive orders, and Doge, and even Bitcoin hit a new high. I mean, he really would have enjoyed these last 2 years. And this book too, really. He was a big gardener. And boy, if you could only have seen me now. I didn't really catch the bug until after he died. You could say the same about Gordon and the Magic Bug. If you see these two books right here, they are from Lynn Thorndike, and they are Volume 1 and Volume 2 of A History of Magic and Experimental Science. Each of these bad boys is 800 pages. Something lit a fire in me that I wanted to know more about my friend's expertise after he died. It's strange. But when you see the movie of life just continue to play on, knowing that the people you lost would have really enjoyed some of those scenes, it's something that gets me pretty good. But This is just one of those things, more than most. And another thing I love about Todd's book is that it's not vague. So many magic books fail to give you the good stuff, the actual blueprints for the things that they're writing about or writing around. Todd includes all the details, the step-by-step guide to a lot of things. It's as much a grimoire as anything else that calls itself that. It gets very specific about all sorts of magical processes, all sorts of various goals. I'm glad he's out there sharing all this knowledge that he's gained. And the more I've engaged with the process of growing, the more I do see it as magical and reality itself as magical. I'm quite tired, as everyone is, of the Matrix analogies and language. How would we ever express ourselves without that movie? But it's true that we are so distracted and engaged with this false reality of careers and cubicles and entertainment and car registrations and license renewals and taxes. We go from home to car to workplace to home to couch to bed to car to workplace, rinse and repeat. It's really easy to assume we know what it's like to engage with nature and growing and permaculture, but not actually doing it. And there are a lot of subtle things that come up and remind you, oh yeah, actually, the earth is an entity and it wants to work with me to generate consumable energy that tastes amazing. You know, a single passion fruit plant yields about 200 or even 300 fruit a year. It has both the summer and winter harvest, so it's not just all coming at you at once. They're about $2 or $3 per fruit. That's if you go to Sprouts. If you go to Whole Foods, you might even hit $3.50. But that's $500 worth of fruit from a single plant every year. I really don't like to put it in dollars very often, but more like sustenance for the family. That is a lot of nutrient content from a single plant. And I know we're not going to be going off the grid. We're not going to be farmers living off our acre of land without the need for a grocery store. That's not even my goal. For me, it's more about supplementing our mediocre diets and the Western diet in general with things we can grow right here for free. Do you know fruit loses about 30% of its nutrient value a week after being picked? How much fruit are you eating within 7 days of it being picked? It has to get on the truck, get to Whole Foods, sit there for a few days. You buy it, it sits on your counter for a few days. We almost never get things within 7 days, but the reality is industrialization cannot compete with how the system was set up to be. Try as it might, most of it is propaganda that it's actually competing. If you actually compare the two, it isn't. Another thing we grow here is the Barbados cherry. They have more vitamin C than anything, and you can't actually buy them fresh anywhere, as far as I know. Surprise, surprise. If you eat 2 or 3, that's a day's value of vitamin C, 2 or 3 cherries. It is nuts. And I also think all those nutrient and vitamin recommendations are designed to be low, to be psychologically manipulative. But you get your kids eating like 2 or 3 of those a day, just walking outside, and then add some mulberries and some cranberry hibiscus, you're cooking with gas. It's like instead of Flintstones vitamins, we eat that stuff. It's not necessarily a replacement for anything in the diet as much as it is a replacement for something like the Flintstones vitamin. Now with Todd's book, I can get better with timing for sure. The planting timing, I mean. And maybe I can appeal to the great oak or the spirits of the land to encourage the wildlife to spare some of the harvest. Let's get into it. Let's play around a little bit. This should be fun. So I'm a huge fan of this book. Glad this was recommended. Shout out to Gail at Inner Traditions. She knows how to pick them. I said this in the show. I know people are at different points of their lives. I know not everyone finds growing things interesting, but it is the number one thing the system took from you. It sold a lie that you didn't need it, and a concrete, industrialized modern city full of EMF, smog, and artificial lights is better, but it's not. To me, growing has become, listen to me, so arrogant now that I have some land. I'm not trying to be that way, but I think it should be something that is on your bucket list, and It's kind of like brushing your teeth. I just don't think this life is designed for you to go without doing it. And without a little land unrestricted by city ordinances and HOAs, you really just don't have much freedom at all. I lived the first half of my life without much freedom, so I empathize. When I think about how to push back against the cultivation of our dependence, it's really the only thing there is. Spend the first 40 years of your life awakening to this fact and then finding your path to moderate success, and then spend the last 40 years being the master of your own domain and put it all in a trust and say, our family does not exchange land for green paper. It cannot be sold, only accumulated. Even if you're not there economically, I hope a show like this can at least be interesting intellectually and maybe motivating as to why we do the shitty job. It's not just to run another lap on the hamster wheel. It's that there is a goal in sight, I hope. Oh, well. All right. Well, in higher side news, I did have to record this interview with my computer webcam. I've got one of those Mac Studio displays, insanely overpriced, and the built-in webcam is not nearly as good as was advertised, but it works in a pinch. My new camera here was freezing up, and I think I got that sorted, and I've even repositioned it a bit, and I think I got things dialed in as good as I can around here. When the studio stopped working out, I kind of just had to cobble something together and keep the train moving. I took that short break recently, and I really did take the time to study a whole bunch of video podcasts from different genres that record remotely, and I found what I like and what I don't, and I opted to sort of change the framing of things going forward. Instead of this tight, close-up, almost yearbook photo framing we have been using, I'm opening this bitch up. We're going to do a lot more side-by-side shots, because I think a fun part of this is seeing people's backgrounds and looking at the details. I even took the background blur off my own background because I know it's a sharp look that everyone likes, but why have a bookshelf background if you can't at least try to make out some of the titles back there? You know, I don't want to make that intentionally fuzzy. I don't know. I'm sure I'll drift back and forth on that. The issue with the wide side-by-side is that it leaves a lot of real estate at the top and bottom of the traditional, typical ratio format. So I made a simple framing that plugs plus and also doesn't look cluttered or too busy and works well enough that I think it's not annoying or distracting, but you will let me know and you'll see it on the next one. Now let's talk about the last one, George Howard. Fun guy, right? Really easy to listen to, good storyteller, and I thought hearing him talk about Malcolm Bendall and the No Show Joe show was great. I've always wondered what that interview was about. I know it kind of embarrassed Randall Carlson, but I think Randall is savvy enough that if he found value in it, then there probably was some there. And we don't even really have to guess, right? Because George said they took tours with the damn thing and that he had been part of several working public demonstrations. So I was really glad that that one fell in my lap too. I basically followed George on Twitter because I wanted to remember who hosted the Cosmic Summit, and he DM'd me saying, hey, I'm a listener of the show. So it all came together. No easier way to get on than to tell me that you're a listener of the show. Well, it was well liked by the people. 4.7. We are back on that top tier, baby. Love to see it. I guess I could also say now that I did record an episode of the Danny Jones Show just the other day. Sam Tripoli put us in touch, and Danny said he'd been listening to THC for a couple of years, and I actually live only about an hour from his studio, so I'm a cheap date. No flight, no hotel, no expertise either. Clearly, he's got a very big audience on YouTube. Maybe we can break me out of that YouTube tombstone algorithm. He gets a ton of great guests, and his professional production is super impressive. I was happy to be there. Of course, we came out of the gate, and he wanted to talk about Tracy, and that's fine. And there are things I know that I wish I could say, but several other podcasters have been sued just for speculating or getting too deep into it. And it's not really some grand conspiracy. It's probably what you might expect in a true crime show if you just think about it, but lawsuits are public record. Go read about Clyde Lewis being taken to court over this stuff, and he's not the only one. So I kind of clammed up. But It didn't take long to find a groove, and I thought it went really well, and we covered a lot of ground. But we all know I'm not an expert in anything, so just to be considered is nice. I don't ask us to rally around things very often as an audience, but when it comes to this coming out, maybe you'll help me hype it up, because it would be nice to do it again. So keep an eye out for that. And so let's move on to the meetup calendar. All right. Gilbert, Arizona, Desert Monks Brewing, June 27th. I think that's this weekend. Also this weekend, June 28th, LA at the Trails Cafe, recurring. It must be working out. Northcote Tavern in Northcote Point, Auckland, New Zealand, July 6th. July 19th, St. Paul, Minnesota at Black Stack Brewing. July 20th, Oaks, Pennsylvania, Arnold's Family Fun Center. And this is a new one, I think. Pullman, Washington, Rico's Public House, August 8th, a Higher Soup meetup. Okay, they're getting the band book club back together for this 18-month anniversary tour. Find out more details about that, but if it's a crossover with Rune Soup, I wish I could be there. And we'll call it in on that. So the calendar's a little light, but it's always available to anyone at highersidemeetups.com. Find the others, build your like-minded counterculture community, trade plants, swap seeds, share beers, whatever it is you want to do. Free and easy, low pressure, have fun, lean into life. All right, well, big thanks to Todd. He's awesome. I'm happy to have gotten to know him. Join his CSA if you're in Ohio and want good produce. And I hope you were value-tained, as PBD might say. I'm out of here. Your move, land looters, birthright stealers, and magic concealers. Your fucking move.
Mama used to tell us stories about playing outside, that thing that we never had to do. They say life is better since they covered the sky and got rid of all that pesky blue. They had no protection from the sun back then, just scary exposed out there. I hear they fight over what they eat each night, a burden we don't have to bear. Because our factory meat cake comes every month, and it always tastes just right. And we never have to get dirty in here, because the pot is always white. Just imagine the trouble of finding some job to do, or finding your own home. The implants weren't made yet, they weren't as connected. You sometimes had to be alone, because they didn't yet know to trust the machines and let them care for you. So thankful we have answers now for everything. Back then they had to think it through. I get nightmares still of the outside world and those books you might have seen. I wake up screaming in the pale glowing night, scared my window lost the pixel screen. I dreamt factory meat cakes didn't come every month, and it almost felt alright. I dreamt we sometimes